you guys like Iron Maiden.
And leave it to the crazy... No, you're not crazy. You're just dark and... Satanistic.
Yeah.
What are you? Gory. Yeah. No, not that either. See, I knew I should have followed my instinct not to be funny.
We'll just say with morbid. How about that?
Morbid.
There you go.
My morbid friendly. So please welcome him. Give him an applause.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks for that intro, Lynn. Yes, I will repeat a little bit of that information, just a touch. So this is me. As Lynn said, I've been in games for about 30 years, and I've been at Double Fine 19 of those years. And currently, I am both an art director and what Double Fine calls as a project lead, which is a creative director or a director in any other company. We hold on to that title because it was what LucasArts back in the 90s used to call game directors, and Tim won't let that go. So Double Fine has been around 25 years. We're located in San Francisco. And we have a lot of our people work there, but we also have people all over the world who work with us. I've worked in games for 30 years, and some of the games here are just a few of the games that I've either directed myself or art directed. My first game there was Brutal Legend, which I was the art director on. Let's see. So let me outline what we're going to do today. We're going to start by looking at my last game briefly, which is Keeper, which shipped just this last year, and I'm going to show you a bit about that and talk about just some of the, so you know, like how long it took, how many people make it, the general way we approached making it, because we're going to use it as an example of some of the techniques I'm going to talk about for creative leadership. And then we're going to move into kind of three big areas of creative leadership. And I'm going to approach this from the perspective of leading an entire game project, but these techniques and these ideas still work quite well if you're just like a feature leader or you're owning part of the game. So I think you'll find them broadly applicable to whatever you're doing. And we're going to start with techniques I use to kind of create the vision, how you get things going. And then everyone's favorite, communicating the vision, because we all like talking, I'm sure. And then we're going to talk about changing the vision, or when you have to modify your original vision based on the reality of game development. And then we're going to do a hands-on workshop after that. All right, so let's talk about Keeper. So I mentioned it shipped last year. It was October 16th last year. We shipped it. All right, yeah, thank you. All right, I was like, sometimes I go to talks and I wonder, was this really relevant to me? They made this with 800 people and they had 10 years. So I want to tell you exactly kind of how we made the game so you have some sense of the scale of it's at. I think by a AAA game standards, we're an incredibly tiny studio, but by a lot of very small indie teams, we're quite large. So we'll kind of be sitting in the middle of that. We started making the game mid-2022. We had finished Psychonauts 2 in end of 21, and then the company split into several small teams, and Keeper being one of them. we made the game, we released October 17th, as I said. Our core team was about 23 people. Now that meant that we started with quite a bit fewer. I think we started with 4 or 5 people, and we ramped up over the course of production, and towards the end we added some additional contractors, so we averaged about that. I don't think we were much bigger than that, but we were quite smaller than that for a while. We used Unreal 5. We actually started using Unreal 5 when it was still in beta, so all the features we were using were experimental, which was maybe a questionable choice at the time. We learned a lot about that along the way. And our game is about 4 to 6 hours minimum to play through. It's a relatively short game. It's a single-player offline game. And our initial release was just on Xbox Series X and S, Windows, both Steam and Game Pass, and we have other platforms that aren't announced yet but are be coming out this year, very soon. All right, we released in 26 languages simultaneously, which sounds really impressive, but it's a largely wordless game, so it's not actually that impressive. But it was actually still kind of a new process for us to ship in all those territories at the same time. And we were an E10 plus game in the States, similar PEGI ratings. All right, so our overall timeline, that meant we came in about 3.5 years to make the whole thing from start to finish. And that's actually been the longest project I've led at Double Fine. I've art directed and worked on games that were up to 5 years long, like Brutal Legend was about 5 years long. But the games that I've led, like Stacking was one of the first games I led there, that was 13 months from start to finish. So because we're now funded by Microsoft or Xbox Games, we have a little more time to craft our games without worrying about not paying people. So of those 3.5 years, we spent about 3 months in ideation initially, and this is when it's just a few people. This is, for us, this is largely just trying to prepare the core vision of the game so that we can ramp up a little bit and go into pre-production. And pre-production was about 6 months, and for Double Fine, when we come out of pre-production, there's a lot of deliverables we have. The most important one is to actually have some sort of playable chunk of your game that demonstrates what we call the creative heart, so not just the mechanics, not just the look, but as much of all that as we can, so people kind of understand what the vision for this game is, that they get excited to want to make it. And we show it to Microsoft as well and get some initial feedback. And then for production, we spent about 28 months. Actually, during the final year of our game, Microsoft wanted to reduce our timeline. So not only did we have to ship on time, we had to ship ahead of time. For them, it was about launch window. It wasn't anything else. So they're trying to find the right window to launch the game because it's a very crowded marketplace. And so it can be challenging to find the right time to release your game. And then that meant we spent closing, that's sort of the alpha, beta, user research, heavy play testing, porting to different platforms, all of that. We spent that time there. And since we released, we've spent some additional time. We've gone down to 4 people. So most of the team has moved on to other unannounced projects. And we've ported it to one other platform. We've done 3 or 4 updates, some of which were bug fixes, some of which were new accessibility features. Some are just new fun features. We added like a really black and white mode to the game and very cinematic presentation mode for like 32:9 monitors. I'm getting a little close to this mic. All right. I promise we'll get into creative stuff, but I want to tell you the structure here. So the milestone, the way we did our milestones is we had, each milestone was about 3 sprints long. And a sprint for us was 3 weeks long. So that meant we spent about 9 weeks per milestone. And that meant we also spent an additional hardening and planning week. So we would spend 3 3-week sprints, so about 9 weeks actually making stuff. And then we took a week every milestone to fix bugs, to do some more play testing, and then plan our next milestone. So we tried to not add any content in that hardening week, which like all developers, we totally did, but we were trying to stabilize the build regularly, so we knew we were on track. We ran the team so that we had like 2 stand-ups a week. We did work in an agile way for the most part. I personally think that daily stand-ups are not the best choice. A lot of people disagree with me on that, but the way I look at it is you need at least a few times a week to connect with your team and discuss things. And so I would take longer in those stand-ups to make sure I could answer creative direction questions even during stand-ups because we were all there, so why not answer them at that point? But doing it every day, there wasn't enough change every single day in the game, and I'd rather have people making the game instead of talking about making a game, which is, my general philosophy. We had team meetings once a week. And those team meetings would either be one of three things. They were either team brainstorms. We'd regularly brainstorms about new parts of the game, features, or we'd play test it. We'd meet and play part of the game, and we'd all discuss it and provide our own feedback on the game, or planning new features, discussing new features that were coming up. So some more utilitarian things here. We used Fabro for our task tracking. A lot of the other teams use Jira, but I prefer Fabro. I've been told it's Favro, but I can't say that word seriously. It just sounds wrong. I like it better than Jira. It's a little more visually oriented, and as a visually oriented person, I like to just throw videos and comments and annotations and images, and Jira handles that much more seamlessly than, Favro handles it much more seamlessly than Jira. We use Slack as our standard communication tool. We use Miro a lot. This was the first project I led that was hybrid, so not everyone was in-house. So everything from level design maps to brainstorms to art direction, mood boards, everything was through Miro that was like that. We use Sync Sketch, if you're not familiar with that. That's a tool for, originally for critiquing animations, but we would actually let you kind of go to a frame of a video and do drawovers or make comments. But we would actually use it, I'd use it for playthroughs. I'd do a playthrough and narrate my playthrough and provide feedback to the team, and we could go back through those frames and call out tasks and discuss them further. And Google Docs like everyone else on the planet. And OBS, one of the big changes for me during this project was to move away from documentation and to move more towards video creation for feedback and game direction, and I'll talk about that a lot. So we asked, kind of everyone, like, just be able to record video. It really helps with hybrid workflows, but also you get much more engagement from your team, I think, if they're looking at a video than a document. We were really happy to actually connect with people, and a lot of the quotes and feedback we got were very emotional and thematic, and that was really rewarding because that was kind of what I was going for. So just a few of them up there, and we've been lucky enough to be nominated for a whole bunch of awards and won a few as well. That was very satisfying for us. All right, let's get back to creativity. What the fuck is creative leadership, right? Like that's the fundamental question. I mentioned earlier that we call creative directors project leads, but it's really just about anyone who's responsible for creating some sort of vision and guiding others or working with others to help make that vision actually happen, is how I define creative leadership. And like I said, you don't have to be leading a whole game for these lessons to be relevant. And oftentimes, at least at Double Fine, creative leaders in our studios work alongside producers. So the producer is often parallel in terms of like team hierarchy, but they're just responsible for things like scheduling, milestones, workflows. They don't handle any of the sort of creative vision side of the things. So they're kind of, I find, invaluable partners in the production process, and we focus on different things. Let's talk about creating the vision. I just had to, every time I'm mic, I gotta do that. Gotta talk in this voice. All right, so where do you start? This is, it's a classic blank page problem. Like you're an artist, you're like, where do I start? How do I get this stuff out of my head into a way that it can be actionable? So I'm gonna go over some what I consider these kind of foundational techniques. You've probably heard of a lot of them, but I'm gonna give you examples of how I use them. And of course, different games and different size teams will use them differently, but this helps me get moving. So first is an elevator pitch. I'm sure you've heard of the word before, but really an elevator pitch in its essence, I think, is best as a high-level statement. It's just trying to get people excited about your game. I think it's not really about technical details or diving into core mechanics too much. It's really more about the creative promise to the player, like what's exciting about this game. Something I see all the time that I like to avoid is this, what I call the X plus Y pattern, where people choose to describe their games of like, it's like Dark Souls meets Animal Crossing. Actually, that'd be pretty cool. But I think the problem with it is, he's doing a punishingly difficult game. So when you just say a game, people think you mean different things, and sometimes it's the opposite of what you intend. And they don't always tell you that. Sometimes it's like, oh, we're not interested. And then you find out later, well, they didn't like difficult games. And you're like, that's not what I meant, you know. So I just avoid using it. And what I do instead is I focus on the following. So framing, I always include framing. And so framing for me is just a fundamental statement. Is it a 2D game? Is it a 3D game? Is it first person? Is it third person? Is it a side scroller, top down? Because when I'm giving someone an elevator pitch, they haven't seen anything about the game yet. And if you don't give them that basic framing, they probably spend the rest of your elevator pitch wondering, well, what is this 3D? Like, what is this? Genre, even though I avoid the X plus Y pattern, I do think genre is a really good tool, and just basic genre. You don't have to go too far into weird subgenres, but you know, are you making a platformer? Is it an adventure game? Is it a shooter? You know, a roguelike? Anything that you think is relevant that captures most of what your game is about. And then there is an opportunity to add, you know, either a gameplay hook or something about the mechanics or your hook in here. And that's really, is there a quick statement about your mechanics or loop that's different from everyone else that you can put in there, so that you see that you're not just, you know, making a copy of someone else's game. And lastly, I would say include something about story. And by story, I don't mean, you know, a detailed plot and character breakdown, but you want to be able to tell them like who the player character is, where's the game set, like what are their goals, what are their obstacles, just something in that space, so that you've thought about that as well. So let me give you a few examples of elevator pitches I put together. All right, so this is Keeper's elevator pitch. And what it says is, Keeper is a beautiful and surreal third-person, atmospheric puzzle adventure and a story told without words, where a lighthouse is awakened after eons of lying dormant and compelled to reach the mountain peak at the center of the island. The lighthouse is joined by Twig, an unusual seabird who seeks refuge from a malevolent presence known as the Wither. Along the way, the two new friends meet strange forms of life who help them on their journey. Now, Keeper is a mechanics light game, so there's not a lot of discussion about that in the pitch. It leans more on story, but you can see that I do have frame and genre in there. I say right up front, it's a third person, it's a puzzle adventure, and then because it's actually kind of a hard game to have an elevator pitch because it's a very unusual game, I try and give people like some idea of the weirdness. So as soon as they see like, well, how does a lighthouse waking up? Does that mean it's walking? You know, it gets them intrigued for the game. Here's another elevator pitch I did for an earlier game I made. This is a game called Headlander. And this one reads, Headlander is a side-scrolling action-adventure game set in a 70s-inspired retro future world. Humanity has abandoned their bodies and instead exist in robotic imposters which are controlled by a deranged computer. You play the last living human in the galaxy, but you're only a head. Mysterious benefactor has outfitted the player character with a special helmet, allowing him to launch his head, land into, and take control of any imposter body. The player character uses this powerful ability to evade capture, uncover clues to his fragmented past, and laser battle their way into the core of the central computer, ultimately deciding the fate of humankind. So this game obviously still features some of the same frame and genre and story, but it actually talks about mechanics. You know, the hook, one of the hooks of Headlander is you're a flying head, and you can pull off the heads of robots and land into them, take control of their body. But also, it's got a lot more combat in it than, say, Keeper, which has none. So I allude to that with laser battles. All right. I'm going to go, so that's usually where I start, is thinking of an elevator pitch. Even if it's rough, even if you don't have all those answers, just getting something down. The next step for us before going to a gameplay prototype is some sort of video visualization. People can see something moving on screen. You'll learn something, even if it's not interactive, and other people will get an idea of where you're going. And one of the techniques we often use is rip-o-matic. The problem with video in general is it can be quite expensive to make. Like if you need to make a whole bunch of custom concept art or do a full animation, at that point you may not have that capability, or maybe it just takes too long and you want to be making your game. So the idea with a rip-o-matic is that instead of doing the custom thing, you do it quick and cheaply by taking everyone else's footage and cutting something together. Now in my case, I don't use footage from other games because I want there to be a layer of interpretation there. Again, if it's we have sometimes used game footage, but I tend to use movie footage or footage from animation or something like that instead. Because you're not releasing this to the public, it can be a copyright violation, right? No one cares. And so I'm going to show you one that I made for a game called RAD. RAD was, not to go into too much detail about the game, but it was a roguelike. It was set in an 80s inspired post-apocalyptic world. And it was a mix of, the tone of the game was a mix of playfulness and retro aesthetics and nuclear annihilation, which is kind of an odd combination. So I wanted to create a Rip-O-Matic that kind of captured some of that vibe, but also with the footage we picked, we even managed to capture some of the feeling of the mechanics. One of the core ideas of the game is that by journeying through the wasteland, you absorb the toxins from the wasteland, which causes you to mutate and become more powerful. And each time you mutate, it's random. And you mutate more and more the longer you live and become less and less human. And so that is something that we were able to kind of sneak into this Rip-O-Matic as well. So let's take a look at that.
What's going on?
They take about 30 minutes to reach their target. So do theirs.
Want to confirm, is this an exercise? Copy. This is not an exercise.
And that was damn near the death of us all. Look at us now. Dying times here.
Oh, this is something special.
All right, cool. Yeah, that was really, something we did in a short period of time and really helped get things going for people. But the next step for us can sometimes be a previs. So previs is more than a Rip-O-Matic, it's more than a video, but less than a gameplay prototype. Okay, the goal is still to express some of the creative vision, but it's actually to let you learn some lessons as well. And even though, even with a mechanics heavy game, you might say, well, how much can I learn from a previs that's non-interactive? And actually the answer is a lot. I use After Effects for these, but other teams at Double Fine use Toon Boom, Photoshop, whatever they want. And the goal, the goal for previs is to think about your camera controls and character, right? The classic 3 C's, but just seeing kind of the camera view of your world, or how big the character is on screen, or how much space you need to tell your story, or to have the sight lines for your combat, or for things to be readable. It's a really good early window into all those things before you invest too heavily. The one that we're going to look at now is a previs. It's a bit long, but we did learn a ton from it. So right now I'm gonna describe it while we wait for Google to catch up. Yeah, so this was one we created for a game called Broken Age. Broken Age was a game that we kickstarted back in, oh my lord, 2012, I think, somewhere in there. And it was the idea was that we wanted to kickstart a classic point-and-click adventure game, but it was all done in public, so we documented the whole thing, and that meant that we were also sharing our production process as we were making it. And when we started I wanted to do this previs because Tim had not yet written anything about the game. So all we knew is that we wanted to make a point-and-click game, and all I had was like a couple of paintings of concept art. And so what I did is I scanned this concept art. It was actually a traditional painting, and I cut it all up, did some quick animation, wrote a whole scenario, wrote some fake dialogue, and what this previz let us learn was again, like what we wanted to do with camera and character, but it also let us explore very early like what the UI might be for object interactions, what our dialogue system might need to do. And one thing I wanted to do differently than traditional adventure games was think about how scenes connected together, because a traditional adventure game back in the day, in the 90s or whatever, would just cut between scenes. And cutting is only one cinematic tool, so this let me explore like doing multiple layers of parallax, fades, zooms, all sorts of different transitions. And we actually learned a ton from this, but this was just about 2 weeks of work with me in After Effects.
Looks like the mail hasn't arrived yet. Hey, looks like a renewal notice for Extreme Lumberjackery magazine.
You won't believe the taste in my mouth right now.
You must be...
Yes, I am the dialogue tree. You may ask 3 questions.
Only 3?
Yes, 2 left.
Wait, that doesn't really count, does it?
Sure does. 1 more to go.
Damn it, wait. Oh, great dialogue tree. I seek your legendary vision and insight. I am questering... that's not a word, is it?
Nope, we're done here.
I mean, obviously, we a few other folks were involved, of course. Like we had someone come in and do the audio. We recorded some scratch dialogue from people working there, just to get that kind of initial feeling. And although the game looked quite a bit different, we did learn a lot about what we did and didn't want to do just from that basic previs. Yeah.
Yeah, and which assets did you have before those 2 weeks started? Was the graphics already the drawings?
We had our one of the concept artists had painted like a really wide horizontal painting of a cabin, like that first scene with the woods, and also had done like a separate painting of the character. So I scanned those and just cut them all up. We didn't have everything in multiple planes. We didn't have any effects. The character was static, and I just made puppets out of the characters and then just painted in wherever else. Like when we had the cabin roof open and a rocket come out, or upstairs, that was just stuff I painted real quick just to explore all those sort of transitions and how it would work. You know, the fidelity wasn't really the focus of it. You know, I think it looks okay, but we were mainly just trying to get just enough fidelity so it wasn't distracting. You know, like a lot of the, he's got a really creepy look on his face half the time because he's just smiling the whole time and his eyes are looking around. But I wanted to at least put some attempt at facial expression to show that that was something we would have to consider. Whereas, you know, like a traditional adventure game, if we were just looking at like Secret of Monkey Island or Full Throttle, oftentimes they wouldn't have any awareness of the space or look around. They would only sort of animate if you did something specific. So putting it in there was a way to say, hey, we should probably explore that aspect of it nowadays. You know, so. Okay, we are making games after all, not videos, so at some point you're going to do an actual gameplay prototype. And again, at Double Fine, we've learned that it's really important for us to find the creative heart early on. And I mean that in that it's not just about the mechanics. And I don't mean that in a bad way, like mechanics are obviously the core of most games. But I think finding the creative heart helps people understand what your game is, because they're not, everyone looking at your game early on isn't a developer or a game designer. And it also helps you think about what your game is beyond just mechanics. And it also makes your mechanics more meaningful if they're in a context that people can see or feel. At Double Fine, we often do this process called Amnesia Fortnight. And it is a 2-week game jam. And we do them once a year, once every other year. Some of them, those have been public. A lot of them have been private. And the idea is that we stop whatever projects we're working on. The team all pitches different ideas. We vote on them. And then we divide the company up into those teams. And you get 2 weeks to realize your game. So the person gets to try out being a project lead. Other people maybe even do different things than they normally do. You might be a concept artist, but maybe want to animate or something along those lines. Or maybe you're normally a systems engineer, but you've always wanted to do gameplay design. So we try to fit people into these projects based on their needs. And again, we're hoping to find like a creative heart for that project. And sometimes that complete experience winds up being really helpful. So at one point we finished Brutal Legend, and we assigned Brutal Legend 2 with Electronic Arts, and shortly into it they decided to cancel it. And we were suddenly a whole studio of people. We were about 75 people working over the Legend, and we needed to quickly pitch something. And so we actually had an Amnesia Fortnight prototypes, and we went and pitched them, and we signed 4 of them, and that's actually what kept the studio intact. Had it just been a gameplay and mechanics exploration, it would probably not been signed. But because they had some representation of the overall creative direction, we got them signed. And that's actually how I went up doing stacking for the first time. Came out of that. All right. I want to show you an early prototype we made for Headlander. I don't think we've ever really shown this publicly. This was not done in Amnesia Fortnight, so it was a little bit longer. We had 8 people making this, and it was done in about a month, so about 4 weeks work from nothing. So, you know, that's a lot of work, right? Because in our case, you'll see it's a 3D prototype, so we had to, you know, do some very early stab at art direction and characters and animation and gameplay mechanics. It was really helpful in not only finding the tone of Headlander, which is like 70s science fiction, which is a bit you know, ridiculous and cheesy and fear of technology, and also like very swanky and colorful. But it also revealed some mechanical challenges we're going to have with the game. So the core mechanics of the game were about you shooting the heads off of robots and then launching your flying head to land into their body to take control. And in a side scroller where the camera's pulled out pretty far, targeting heads and making that clear to the player that as a visual affordance required a lot of work to get right. So you'll see in this gameplay prototype there's a lot of bouncing lasers and stuff, and you know, people not hitting the heads and stuff. So I'm going to show you this video footage, but it's just a recording of us playing the prototype for about 5 minutes. So it's not an edited video or anything. This is, oh, one other thing I was going to mention, just in case you're curious, is this engine was made, this was made in 2014. So at that point we weren't yet using Unreal. We were using our own custom engine, which was originally developed for Brutal Legend, that we, I think, and when Headlander shipped in 2016, it was like the last game to use that custom engine. All right, here we go.
Welcome, citizen. Your utopia begins now.
Legal weapon fire received.
Relax. You are the endless potential of humanity. Enjoy.
Cease all aggression.
Things are only getting better.
Under merit issued. Cease all aggression.
Your utopia begins now.
Transferring consciousness to
Relax. You are the endless potential of humanity. Enjoy. Things are only getting better.
You are unauthorized.
Interloper detected. Or activating shepherds. Shepherds converge on your utopia gate. Shepherds assume defense protocol.
3, 2, 1, 5, 6, 9, 0 beta. You are not authorized for weaponry.
Made in America, my ass. Is that the best you can do, candy ass?
Resistance is right. Cease all ambulatory activity at
Lucky shot, Chrome Dome.
You are not authorized for weaponry.
Oh, this is gonna take some getting used to.
Under merit issued. Legal weapon fire received.
Let's open the pipes on this clunker.
Legal weapon fire received. Prepare for imminent arrest.
Is that the best you can do, candy ass?
Resistance is right.
Caution. Weapons fire in reactor tube is prohibited.
Prepare for imminent
Warning. Reactor Alpha has sustained damage.
legal personality must view.
Warning. Reactor Alpha is
24.6897%
damaged. Warning. Reactor Alpha is
55.8976% damaged.
warning. Reactor Alpha is
95.6793% damaged.
warning. Reactor Alpha is now critical. Explosion imminent.
Mortality authorized weaponry.
So let's talk about everyone's favorite part, communication. You know, really a big part of being a creative leader is communicating your vision. And if you're like me, I didn't really get into making games or go to art school to talk a lot. But to really be an effective creative leader, you do need to communicate a whole lot. Even if you're a solo dev, you might eventually have to onboard new folks to your team or over the course of production, and you need to tell them what your game is about. You need to be able to tell them as soon as they join kind of like really where the heart of your game is. And you're also probably going to have to communicate your vision to a publisher if you're seeking funding. And certainly by the time you ship, you're hopefully going to be able to talk to players and press a whole lot. It's a big part of the job. And I want to show you some tools that I use to help you communicate what your game is about. The big one is creative pillars. And I'm sure you've heard the word pillars before, sometimes in the context of a design document. But I like to think of pillars as the foundation for your game. Like they support the core experience of your game, but they give you also, in addition to communicating the idea, they're going to give you a basis to evaluate any future ideas and whether they belong in your game or not, which is really helpful during production. They're kind of guideposts that I think of them as a set of shared artistic constraints. In my case, in most cases at Double Fine, we establish them pretty early on, and they don't change a lot through development. Features change a lot through development. You iterate and follow the fun, but usually the core ideas stay the same. And a good creative pillar is short. I like to use just a keyword maybe, or maybe a short phrase or sentence. And they're very high level. They're not the how of your game. You're not telling people how you're going to make it. They're the what of your game. Like what are these core elementals in your game? And I think you want to have 3 to 5. If you have fewer than 3, maybe you still have some holes in your creative direction. But if there are more than 5, you probably need to focus. And this is just an average. It can change per game. Google is waiting again. What I'm going to do next, as soon as Google wakes up, is I'm going to show you some examples of creative pillars that I've created, and we're going to go over the ones that I created for Keeper, since they're the most recent. Just need to wait for Google to catch up. I know with this dramatic pause, you're like, these are going to be the most amazing pillars ever.
Yeah, you designed it this way, right?
That's right, yeah. The dramatic pause. The dramatic, always awkward pause. All right, here we are. Okay, so Keeper, I focused on 4 pillars over the course of creating Keeper. So the first one is encountering the unexpected. And then atmospheric. Finding companionship in a strange place. And the last one would be metamorphosis or transformation over the course of your journey. I'm going to elaborate a little bit on each one of those, but these are the sort of 4 keywords that we would start with, and when we'd want to add a new feature to the game, we'd look and say, does it support one of these pillars? So it's about the unexpected. We really wanted Keeper to be kind of this reality-bending experience that would be full of surprise, absurdity, drama, delight. We didn't really want the player to know what to expect next, because it tells its story without words, and so our goal was to gently guide the player through the experience, and just when they thought, okay, I get what this game is, to like really switch it up on them and give them plenty of room to form their own interpretations about what the experience is about. For me, it started with the idea that I'm rarely surprised in games anymore, or movies. I'm like, okay, it's one of these. And I like a lot of the things that are genre plays, but I wanted to make something that people really didn't know what the hell it was. It's also a game that focuses on atmosphere. And so for me, that started with, I wanted to create a wordless experience. And part of that, logically following through with that, it was, well, I also don't really want a UI, or much of a UI, and I don't really want a HUD. And I don't really want the player to be able to fail at the experience or die. So I don't want any combat, I don't want any skill trees, I don't want any grinding. We do have puzzles and traversal challenges, but it's not supposed to be hard. And the reason why that all followed on from atmospheric for me was a thought experiment to go, if I'm putting people in an unexpected weird world, and the focus is on beauty and atmosphere, and I'm not telling them where to go or what to do, if I make it punishingly hard or difficult or confusing, everyone's going to be like, this is bullshit. Like, this game's not telling me anything. So what we try to do is get the players to realize early on that they can't fuck it up. Like, just go, relax, do what we called it a weird but chill experience. Just go for the ride. And atmospheric was a big pillar for us. We also had the idea of companionship. We started the game, like one of the core inspirations for the game kind of took place during the pandemic, and I thought a lot about friendship and companionship, and we expressed that through this bird companion called Twig. And Twig is there to really kind of tell the emotional story of these 2 strangers, a lighthouse and a seabird, coming together in this sort of weird, environment and forming in friendship and helping each other reach their goals. And we express that not only in story moments, but also mechanically. So a big one is that the lighthouse has the ability to shine its light and aim its light. And it has a couple of modes for its light that can do things like grow platforms, or repel enemies, or attract other enemies, reveal secrets. But the bird can do things the lighthouse can't. So the lighthouse doesn't have arms, because that's insane. It only has legs. But the bird can like fly off and grab things. It can manipulate puzzle elements. It can actually pick things up and hang them on the lighthouse to act as inventory items and use those in a different context. And so many of the puzzles became about the player using those abilities together, which reinforced the idea of companionship, that together they're better than individually. And we used mechanics to tell that story. But also, speaking of mechanics, the bird also had two other things it could do that the lighthouse couldn't. And they're relatively subtle, but the bird would often leave the lighthouse. It would be flying on the lighthouse. It would sort of leave the lighthouse and fly to points of interest along the way to help highlight the path, since we weren't giving the player really any affordances to know exactly where to go. This was an indirect way to highlight it. And also the bird had an emote button the lighthouse didn't have, which meant it could communicate, and again, it wasn't understandable human language, but it could kind of make these sounds and elicit reactions from other creatures. Some of that was just playful player expression, but some of it was like highlighting more important things, and that highlighted our companionship as well. And the last one is probably the weirdest of our pillars, which is metamorphosis. So the idea here is that a search for meaning in your life, right? The idea that you have to change to overcome obstacles and find that meaning. And so we really wanted to make that almost literal, not just metaphorical. So over the course of the game, the lighthouse completely changes its physical appearance and the way it moves through the world. So at one point in the game, the lighthouse tumbles off a cliff and breaks apart. And you might think, wow, this is the shortest game ever. It's dead. But no, we go into a time-lapse sequence, and you actually see a great amount of time passed, and the forces of the island, waves, little crowds, etc., help reform the lighthouse as a sailboat. And you still have that light, that lens on the front of the sailboat, but now instead of walking over the island, the player's sailing through the island. It can go under the water. It can do things that the lighthouse couldn't, like ferry passengers and jump. But you still use the light as your core verb, and you still got your birds with you. But we don't stop there. Later on, the boat is smashed apart by this sort of evil presence, and the only thing that's left is the lens, which kind of rolls away and gets caught on the side of an island, like on a tree overhanging a cliff. And then in what I call the most metal moment of the game, we go through a time-lapse sequence, and you see junk collecting on the light, or the lens, and then lightning strikes, and the whole thing lights on fire. And the flaming tire, as it now is, drops down into the center of the island. And you're very fast. You can burn things with your tire. You can jump, and it's almost like Tony Hawk in a world made of weird meat. So it's very strange and unexpected. And we're not even done then. We actually have one more form of the player character. At the very end, all those former parts of yourself are brought back together. And interactively, you reassemble what I guess I describe as a flaming Pegasus made of boat and lighthouse parts. And the very final part of the game combines not only like the visual elements of those characters, but each of their abilities. So instead of struggling with enemy presence and moving kind of slow, you can just you can like fire dash through all the enemies, and you just effortlessly wipe them off. And it's like this sort of triumphant victory lap for the player to finally reach their goal. So that was just about supporting metamorphosis, all those strange choices. All right, macro design is another tool we use to communicate. And so macro design is I think of it as just a high-level flowchart or board. The idea is to capture a snapshot of your entire game as much as possible by the time you exit pre-production. You're not going to have all the answers. Stuff's going to change a lot. But what it does is it focuses on the player experience and what the game is. Again, not how you're making it or necessarily why you're making it. But what it does is it helps you look at the overall scope of the game and think about how those pieces fit together. And how it's structured depends a lot on the type of game you're making. But typically it represents things like story beats, mechanics, introduction, level type. Is it an exploration level, a combat level? And I would recommend keep it simple and abstract and not get caught up in the details. So let's look at a couple examples here. So here's one from Keeper. This is about mid pre-production. And I put this together with my lead designer, and you can see he put my head in these parts that I hadn't done my work yet. So he was like, fill this in. So it was pretty funny. This was done in Miro, just because it was easier to collaborate that way. But because Keeper is a relatively linear game, we structured it around levels. So you can see we've got this sort of the lighthouse part of the game, Act 1, the boat, the tire, and the conjoined, as we called the final character. And then within that, we have our levels. And some of the key things we were thinking about early on is, what's going to be the overall goal? What are the notable locations in this level? What's the core gameplay here? How long is the estimated play time that we're targeting? It hadn't been developed yet, so it wasn't there yet. Just other things, like quite often you'll see these as when are you introducing different companions, or when are you introducing certain enemies? What's the core puzzles here? This is just, and you won't have all the answers yet, so sometimes when I'm putting these together, I won't know what the puzzles are, but I'm like, well, from a pacing standpoint, we have to have a puzzle at this part of the game. And it really helps you think about the pacing of the game instead of figuring it out along the way, even though it's going to change. Just a couple of examples. Here's one from Headlander. This one was done on a good old-fashioned corkboard. And for this one, again, it was kind of structured fairly linearly around the level progression, but we had different colored cards for different things. So we might have notes on mechanics or notes on special gameplay sequences. So if you look at the very first level, the wake-up ship, these are just some story beats. So the hero learns about imposter bodies. We introduce the benefactor, which is kind of the narrator who helps the player along. And then we've got our tutorials. We need to have a tutorial on combat and headlanding. We need to introduce basic laser combat. Basic headlanding is introduced, laser bouncing is introduced, and then we have like visual notes. Like this is a reference to a movie, a Ukrainian 70s science fiction movie I like, but it could be anything. So these are great for having conversations with your team around, and just talking through it, you realize you have holes in your story or holes in your progression. And am I back on mic? Yes. All right. Cool. And one more example, it's not just me who does these. This is from Uncharted, and it's a more complex game, of course, so you can see that they've broken down their player mechanics and enemy progression a lot more specifically. All these examples I'm showing you are built around level progression because that's common for mini games, but we did this for RAD as well, which was a procedurally generated roguelike, and instead of just like, say, running levels down, we would sort of group them again, like what is the most relevant part of your player experience? So in the case of RAD, it was mutations, and we tended to group them around how mutated the player would be over the course of, say, the biomes. When's that second biome introduced, and when's the third? Where's the boss? When do the bosses come in? And of course, the exact pacing would change a bit because it was procedural, but still a really great way to get a snapshot of all this work in front of you. All right. A couple more things about communicating your vision. So another great tool that doesn't sound exciting, but is really helpful, is an overview deck. So the idea is to prepare a short presentation. And Lynn, let me know too when you want to pause, and I can also keep going. Okay. A short presentation that just provides an overview of your game. The idea is that you want to keep this presentation pretty short. I like to keep them 20 minutes or less to actually go through it. It's just about getting people excited about your vision and not too overwhelmed with like, here's exactly how our hitboxes are going to work and the tuning windows for that. It's not about going into that. And the nice part about having this presentation ready is that when you add new people onto your team, you have somewhere to start. You're like, okay, we're going to go through this. It's going to go over the core tenets of the game, and they can ask questions, and it's a great way to get started. It also can maybe double as a pitch deck, or at least do a lot of the work that's going to be in your pitch deck, because those always come up. Some investor or something will come up, and you're like, got to make a pitch deck. But if you've already done this for yourself, for your team, you'll have a lot of the work done. And the last thing I discovered was that I kept doing this over and over, and I was like, wait, why am I doing this over and over? I'm just going to record a video. And that's what I did. So I would record a video of the pitch deck, myself narrating that, and that was great because I had to, in the last year of Keeper, we had to add a lot of contractors because our timeline got pulled in. And Microsoft was like, well, we need the marketing folks to look at it. And actually, the PR folks want to see it. And now we have a new executive who started an Xbox. They want to know what your game's about. And I could just send them this video and not waste 2 hours of my time. I'm going to show you just a tiny clip of a video. And the important part is, like, this isn't, it's not, it doesn't have to be a dramatic thing. It can be very conversational. It's not about being an amazing speaker or performative. It's just a a short little clip. So, but before we get to that, let me just show you some common components. I won't go into what everything that could be in an overview deck, because that'd probably be a 2-hour conversation. But typically, these are the type of things that you'll see. If you've done your elevator pitch and created pillars, it's a great way to start. Some description of your core game loop or key features. If you're wanting to also present this to any sort of publisher, having some sense of what your timeline, team count, even if you don't know who they are or what your basic budgetary needs are. I said earlier, don't do an X plus Y presentation, but comparable games is something that absolutely will help them. And so that could be as simple as saying, we believe people who play Journey and Cocoon will play Keeper. Because those are both atmospheric puzzle games. And that can kind of double a bit with target audience. The one caution I'd say for you is that when you pick comparable games, pick incredibly successful ones, because some publishers will just take those comparable games and pull comps, as in they'll look at the numbers that they've sold and then determine how much money they want to give you. So even though you might like the weird esoteric thing, don't put it on there. Just what's your intended gameplay link is another really common question. Platforms may be, obviously it's probably Steam nowadays, but you may be doing additional platforms if you're working with a particular publisher, so they'll want to know that possibility. All right, here's the clip I was going to play. It's just a short one. I'm just talking about the... We're going to go through each act now, and I'm going to call out some of those bigger moments and show off some of those violence. That's it. Just an example, right? It doesn't have to be a really dynamic thing, but just give people a way to understand that. Okay, everyone's second favorite thing is documentation, right? So here's the thing about documentation. And I used to write a lot of documentation. I used to write game design documents, level design overviews, art bibles. I started out this way on Keeper, but what you discover is no one reads it anymore. They didn't really read it when I first started in games, and younger folks definitely don't read it. I initially would maybe find that frustrating. But what I found instead, almost accidentally, is what everyone will watch is a video. So instead of, for example, writing up a detailed level design overview, what I would do instead is record using OBS, just a simple video of myself talking over the paper map of the level, which in our case is done in Miro. Just kind of walking them through the beats, or when we're introducing certain mechanics, when I expect the encounter areas to be. And I would post those in Slack for our team. And the other advantage is if you're working with a hybrid team or people in different time zones, they can watch that asynchronously. They don't actually have to be there, in a meeting. And of course, what I found is that everyone watched them. And I got a lot better comments and feedback on these early ideas than when I would put a document up. The other thing that was interesting about that is that we also started working with some remote concept artists. And because I was so used to recording videos, instead of just doing a draw over on their art, I would actually just record a video of myself talking through why certain elements worked or didn't work, and maybe I would draw while I was talking. And they were, the feedback I got from these companies who specialize in outsource, they're like, you're the only art director who does this, and please keep doing it. It was a really consistent set of feedback. So I even started doing feedback on our internal level design and stuff that way too, where I'd play over the game and talk and record it and pause and annotate things. It just became a great step. Obviously, we would have meetings and conversations about it. It wasn't just me throwing a decree down, but just in terms of expressing the communicating the vision and how this did or didn't connect to it, or where I'd like to see things go next. I got people much more engaged that way. And I don't have a video of it, but what I do have a couple of examples here just to show you is that this is what an early level design might look like on Keeper and Miro, where we would kind of do all of our level here. And it was nice because it was much more collaborative than doing level design, or at least the paper map stage elsewhere. And when I would record a video, I'd kind of just pan over that and talk about different sections. I would usually put concepts either I or other people had done in there if they were available. And I even found that it was much more convenient to keep my mood boards and reference doodles, screen caps and other movies in that same space, because then you can kind of pan around and talk about ideas of where you thought that part of the level would go. In this case, this level, we did it for mechanics as well. You would have different types of reference, of course. And it worked really well. Now I do have another section. Lynn, do you want me to do this section before we break? Is that all right, or do you want to break before we do that? This is the last section of the presentation.
You're thinking maybe 10 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, is that all right?
Yeah.
I know everyone's smelling food and they're like, "Lee, shut the fuck up. We want to eat." But you know, it's like, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think this is an important one though, which is the idea of changing your vision. It's really hard to know when to do that. You know, when are you being a good creative leader and selling people the vision, and when are you changing it for good reasons? I want to talk about that. So the first thing I'll say is that, guess what? It's not going to go as planned. Everyone here, your game is not going to go as planned, right? I've been doing this in 30 years. It doesn't matter how experienced or talented you are, it's not going to go as planned. And that's fine. That's part of the creative process, but it's painful in games because games are an unholy combination of software and art, right? They want to be made like software, and software does not want to be made like entertainment or creative projects. So you have to just struggle with that. And I think you'll find one common issue is this one, feature creep, right? And so that's just the idea that your game's scope and features grow as you develop the game. And that's natural and normal, and sometimes it's great, because sometimes you're getting feedback and following the fun, and you're like, okay, well, this initial idea I had is just not enough. It's not, players want more. But sometimes it's just because you're bored. You've been staring at the same thing, or maybe you're a programmer who likes to solve really hard problems, but is that the best for the game? And that's what you have to ask yourself. And so the way I start off is going, okay, is this support our creative pillars? This is another reason to have them. Is it there? And if not, I usually don't do it. It just feels like I'm going horizontal and not focusing the vision. You know, if you're working on a 500-person team, sure, add every random crafting feature you can, but most of us aren't doing that. You know, the other sort of thing that happens is that sometimes ideas just don't work out. And the biggest thing I see is this sunk time fallacy, which is just the idea that, like, you've already put a lot of time or effort or emotional energy into something, so you're just going to keep hammering on that damn thing until it works, and it often just never will. And that's okay. Like, we're fishing, right? We're out there like trying to find that right idea. So sometimes you just need to let it go. You're going to save a lot more time and heartache if you just abandon it. Now, sometimes they do work out, and so you know that's really hard to determine the difference. I start with creative pillars. I get feedback on the experience. I look at the amount of effort required versus how long we're going to spend on this project, and try and use that as a basis. I'm going to give you an example of some scoping changes I made on Keeper. All right, so I define scoping as just kind of reducing your game's scope when things are running behind. And so typically that's done by cutting or slimming down features or the amount of content. It's very hard to do, but the way I look at it is that if you don't make that decision, you really are making a decision. You're just letting fate or a publisher or someone else make it for you, and they'll make it late in the game when it's painful. So you want to make that decision because as the vision holder of your game or feature or level, you're the one who's going to know what disrupts it least. You want to make that decision. And I like to scope regularly by looking at the game at the end of each milestone. So typically that'd be every 10 weeks for me. I mean, obviously playing the game every day, but just kind of taking a moment to kind of look at how it's developed overall with some of our initial goals. I asked myself, are there small changes I could make to streamline things while preserving the vision? But I don't wait too long, because the longer you wait, the less time and resources you'll get back by cutting things. Again, it's that sunk time fallacy. If you wait till alpha to cut stuff, it's going to be really disruptive to your game's flow and pacing and progression. So I try and cut it early. So in Keeper, we had an example where it started with a co-op mode. And I really wanted to do a limited couch co-op mode for Keeper. We actually had it working. Because the game is about companionship, it made sense that you could have a second player do it. But I didn't want it to be the primary feature of the game, so I wanted it to be a drop-in, drop-out feature for the second player to control the bird while the other player controlled the lighthouse. So, on the surface that sounds cool, right? It's supported by the pillars, so why did I cut it? It was optional because, like I said, it was trying to drop in, drop out. So that meant I would have to design all of our puzzles to be playable by either one or two players, which is pretty tricky. You can definitely do it. We had some working, but it adds a lot of design and iteration time to make them satisfying for one or two humans. And even though our controls were challenging because we have pretty limited controls, but if you think about single player would need to have buttons and triggers and whatnot for both characters. But if the other person was jumping in and out, they would take some percentage of those controls, and we'd have to kind of make sure they were satisfying and there was enough buttons to do as the bird, so you weren't just bored waiting for the lighthouse to walk to a puzzle. And it just was really tricky to pull off. And so I think the other thing that convinced me to cut it was that the player expectations for co-op would be high. Even though I still think it'd be a cool mode, but trying to actually sell it or describe it as co-op is dangerous now because of split fiction and games like that, where co-op is a major feature of the game. So I didn't think it'd really move the needle on player interest, but it would be a disproportionate amount of work to consider that in all of our interactions and controls. So I cut it myself at the end of pre-production because it wasn't really a core feature. Our game wasn't ultimately about a co-op experience, and it was painful because I just still think it would reinforce companionship, but it was too much work. So I'm glad I did. We definitely would not have had time for it if I had kept it. Okay, so another sort of change in direction is what I call pivoting. And so the difference between pivoting and scoping is that pivoting is not really primarily about timelines. It's about a change in creative direction or refining that creative direction. So it can be small or large, but the motivation, again, is not about getting time back. It's about what the game itself needs. So maybe a mechanic isn't fun that you thought was going to be fun, or maybe the narrative is super confusing. Maybe levels are too big. That's a really common one. So as with everything creative, it can be hard to know when to pivot. But again, keep in mind our friend, the sunk time fallacy. That's sunk cost fallacy. That's really the biggest reason that people don't want to cut or change direction. But don't be lured in. It's a lie. Here's an example from Keeper. Okay, so early on, we had this idea that the game was going to have multiple companions instead of a single companion. So you might start with the bird, but over the course of the adventure, you'd find and collect more and more companions that would hang out on different parts of the lighthouse, and each companion would have unique abilities. And that was pretty cool because it offered more puzzle and mechanical sort of design space to make those puzzles interesting. But the problem with it was that I think it worked against other creative pillars that I cared about more. And the pillars it was kind of in creative conflict with were companionship and atmospheric. So I thought that if we had multiple companions, the player's emotional attachment to the bird would naturally be de-emphasized because you'd have so many additional companions coming on. And when they start to fill very specific mechanical things, even though the puzzles would probably be on some level more interesting, I think you start to see them as tools, not as a companion. And trying to tell the story about having a whole ensemble cast of mutant creatures hanging out in the lighthouse was quite challenging. And it worked against the idea of atmospheric. If I was giving the player a lot of puzzle complexity, instead of being in this space and drinking in the beauty and having a weird but chill experience, they'd be really focused on the puzzling side a bit too much. So for the tone of our game, we pivoted away from that and pivoted to a single companion, which became that bird. And we did that during pre-production, so we didn't really waste that much time because most of the other creatures were just paper designs and concept art. And I'm glad we did. It did let us spend a lot more time developing the bird's character, and most people who've played through our game comment on the really emotional nature of the game, so I think we succeeded. And it reduced scope a bit. That was, again, not the motivation, but instead of having to have 5 or 6 companions, we had 1. We did pretty much fill that time, though, by having more special moments with that character, so it wasn't really a scope reduction from a time standpoint. It was just really about creative direction. All right, here's the summary, and then we can eat. All right, so here's my first big tip for you is don't let the vampire in the house. So what the hell do I mean by that? So, when the vampire shows up at your doorstep, and the vampire could be anyone off your team who wants to take control of your project, maybe it's the publisher or marketing or other external folks. If your house is in order, if you know what your game is about and you can communicate to that, you can keep them at the door. Because the problem with the vampire is once they're in their house, they never leave. Right? And so you're giving control to someone else that you may not want to. And I don't mean other people on the team that you're collaborating with. I'm talking about outside forces. I've seen it happen over and over again. You're like, oh, I'm an artist, I'm creative, I don't really you know, I don't really want to deal with that side. Well, someone will fill that space for you. If you create a void of understanding, someone will come along eventually and fill that void. And you don't want that to happen. So create your vision. Start early, start broad. I still think as common as they are, elevator pitch and creative pillars are a great place to start. Even if the first number of things you write are garbage, it gets your brain thinking about how to communicate early on. And then, yeah, you need to communicate that vision. Just know that as much as I didn't get into this industry to talk, although here I am, it's really someone needs to communicate that vision. And the better you're able to articulate what you care about most, the more the team is going to naturally work with you as opposed to against you. A lot of times, you want the team to expand on your vision. You want them to bring their expertise, but you don't want them to unintentionally take things in a completely different direction and not have the language to say why that's wrong. Just say, I don't like blue is not good, right? People feel like you're micromanaging them. But if you can say, look, our game is about atmospheric, and atmospheric means this, or it's about companionship, or it's about furious laser battles. So we don't want guns, we want lasers. You have a reason to kind of give that feedback, and it helps guide you. But that being said, you're going to probably need to change the vision over the course of the game. All of you who've ever worked on a game know that it rarely are things work out mechanically as you think they are on paper. You have an idea, you put it together, and you're like, oh, that's really terrible. So how do we change that? Or the harder one is, just thinking of content always as a value add. Well, the more content, the better the game is, right? Nope. It waters it down. So sometimes knowing what not to include in your game is as important as to what to include, and it lets you focus on what's more important. So don't be afraid to make those changes as they come along, and they will come along. The other thing I just want to say is, although I'm up here saying just do all this, it's hard. It's always going to be hard. I've been doing this for 30 years. I still have imposter syndrome all the time. I still question decisions I make all the time. That's not a sign of weakness or lack of experience. It's a sign that you're making something that is different or has a creative vision behind it. And that's hard to just follow a playbook and do the same every time. All right, thanks everyone.